There you go. So thank you for coming this afternoon. It's a pleasure to be speaking to you. My name is Jason Milkins. I'm one of the partners of a law firm based in Bristol called Milkins. We're a corporate commercial firm. Ian Grimley is actually your retained contracts lawyer. I'm one of his partners. I spend most of my time doing transactional work. So as a practice, we're 5 partners. 4 of us take part in transactional work, so that's buying and selling companies. And Ian runs the commercial contracts department. So he's the man that you would speak to more often on a daily basis. I'm the guy that you'd come to if you were thinking of buying or selling a company. As lawyers, we are a senior team. We're quite hands-on. We run our transactions in I think, a slightly different way to the more traditional law firms. We don't win work as partners and then you don't see us again. Ours is quite a hands-on, partner-led service. So that's us with a bit of a difference. We don't do private client work, we don't do wills and probate, we just simply do this work, commercial and corporate transactional work. That will change. Okay, so a little bit more about the firm as we go on. As I said, we're senior lawyers within the firm. We've got a number of assistants that we work with, but all of our transactions are partner-led, which I say makes us a little bit different than the traditional law firm. Going back to what you're really here for, selling your business. So as a transactional lawyer, most of my time is spent dealing with either buying companies or businesses or selling companies or businesses. Selling your business is a good thing. More often than not, we are fortunate as a firm to have developed really quite long-term relationships with our clients. A number of our clients have been with us for probably 10 years. And we've seen them sort of through the ups and downs of their business, and we've got to know them well, and we know what their aspirations are and what they're trying to achieve. Sometimes we get clients referred to us by intermediaries, other people that we've known for a long time. We do very few of these events, and we don't do any advertising as such. Most of our work comes through word of mouth, and just the fact that we've done a good job for one client means that we'll typically get referred to another. If somebody comes to us and we don't know them, so this is a new client for us and they're selling their business, I think the first thing we need to understand is why they're doing it, what's actually driving them, because that will dictate the structure of the transaction and the people that we would suggest that they get on board to help them with the process. Is it a market-driven event? Is it something that you're being forced to do perhaps earlier than you'd ever anticipated? Is there a change in the marketplace? Have you lost a significant customer? Have you been screwed down on some of your supply terms such that you can't make the returns on them that you once could? They're the more tricky transaction because you've got your backs against the wall a little bit, and so you have to be quite clever in the way that you box that one. Hopefully it's one that you've chosen to do, and it's a good thing. It's because you've got to that point where actually you think, well, I've made as much as I can make or want to make out of this, and actually I want to do something else. I either want to retire or I want to go and try and do something else. They're the best ones because you can plan for it and you can take your time and you can shape the transaction to suit you. I've got one on at the moment actually where the seller's quite a young man. He's developed the business, he's bought a few things along the way. He's been made an offer which that sets him up for retirement. It's a bit earlier than anticipated. And so he's going through the process and he can manage it. And actually, he's just emailed me a short while ago to say, when does my exclusivity period run out? When can I actually start talking to other buyers because somebody else has been knocking on the door? So, which is fantastic. And as I said, if you're in that situation and you can plan things early enough, then you can dictate the pace that you go at. So you can start looking at your business at an early stage to work out what will I look like, what will this business look like to a likely acquirer. And you can look at things such as your management team. Are they, if you were looking to buy that business, are they sufficient, or are you still running the show? Are you the most important cog in the wheel? Because if you are, that could be an issue for you, and you might need to step back and reorganise things a little bit. So what I say here is get appropriate advice at an early stage. Do the research and work out what possibilities there may be for you in the marketplace. So plan early. I've got one client that we sold back in the summer, and that's a client that I'd been with or had been working with us for well over 10 years, and we'd sold one company for him. he realised that actually he'd made a few mistakes along the way, and he could have realised some more money for that business had he done things properly, taken a bit of advice and actually shaped himself. So he actually started again, and it was a 10-year plan, set himself up, developed the business. I'll talk about him a little bit more in the next presentation where we talk about acquisition, but he shaped his business such that 10 years down the line he was able to sell it for enough money to retire, actually, for him and other people within it. So that's the key to, that's what we all want to achieve, isn't it? We all want to be able to retire and not have to think about it again. So find the right people to advise you is, I think, absolutely key. Don't be swayed by unsolicited cold calls or things dropping through the post from business brokers that can sometimes be somewhat unscrupulous. And there's a big old difference between a business broker who can behave and act like a bit of an estate agent for corporates than a proper corporate finance advisor who can be worth their weight in gold. So again, it's important that you speak to people that you know and you trust, and whether that be people that you've competitors, people in your marketplace that have been through the process, advisors that you do have on board, even though they might not specialise in this sort of work, that can point you in the right direction. As I say, the worst thing in the world, I think, is when somebody knocks on your door and says, I can sell your company, I can get you 3 times more than you ever thought you could possibly get for it. And I'll do it on a contingent basis, so I won't get paid unless I sell you, but along the way I need to shape your business, and that's going to cost you £6,000 a month for the next 6 months. Chances are that transaction won't happen, and if it does, it probably won't be the best thing for you. So if it looks a bit too good to be true, it probably is. Okay, so just be wary of that. It's important that you don't appoint the wrong people. I was involved a few years ago with a company that was being sold, and it was being sold. It come about through a business broker that had basically dropped a letter through the post. And followed it up with this old chap that was selling, and he was desperate to get out for a number of reasons. Not cash, he had plenty of cash, but for health, really, and family reasons. And he snapped up the offer for this, and I think sort of £30,000-40,000 later, they get around to appointing other advisors, and so they spoke to me and I said, would I be prepared to act? And I said yes. Met the chap, he's a nice guy. Asked if I would work on a contingent no-win, no-fee basis, and I said no, because I want to be able to give you impartial advice throughout the process, and I don't want that to appear swayed in any way. And he took that, and he took it on board, and we were appointed, and I think within a few days of being appointed, you start getting under the skin of the company, and you realise that actually this is a distribution company with one source of supply for a product. The terms, the contract that source of supply was on, frankly, wasn't worth the paper it was written on. The company was in a terrible state in a number of respects, and it had a number of assets within the company that shouldn't have been there. For example, a jet and a private boat. And I said to the business broker, this company is never going to get sold. You'd have to be a complete muppet to buy this thing, or have absolutely no advisors around you. No, it will be sold, crack on. So we carried on, and we're racking up expense now for this chap, and I'm telling him along the way, this contract that you rely on is not worth the paper it's written on. They will not want to buy the jet or the boat. They need to come out, and we should be taking in more advice for you. You need some structuring, you need some proper tax structuring advice, and some financial input there, and you should really be taking this thing off the market and coming back maybe in a year or two's time when you're ready to sell. No, I'm being told by the broker that we can achieve this. I think it was something like 20 million quid that he was hoping to achieve. And as the process went on, of course, that got chipped away, and then eventually the deal fell over, and he'd spent quite a few £1,000s on us, £30,000 or £40,000 retainer on the business broker, a fee to somebody else that was a trusted advisor. It was also on a bit of a backhander from the business broker, and it all was just a horrible mess. That company has still not been sold. They've moved premises, which I think sorted them out to some extent, because, I mean, for example, in their old building, this is a company they were trying to sell, didn't even have lighting. They used to strap torches to their forklift trucks. So it was just simple. You didn't need to be Einstein to work out that this thing wasn't ready for a sale. But there you go. That's where we got to. Look at your internal support processes. Selling a company is incredibly time intensive. You need to be able to get on with your advisors because you're going to see more of them and speak to them more often than your husband or wife. And that's probably going to be for a 3-month period, if not a bit longer, depending on the transaction and how it's structured. But you need to look at your internal support. Quite often owner-managers will say, this has got to be confidential, we can't talk to anybody else, it's just me, and I'll be in the office on the weekends dealing with this. It won't work. You can get so far like that, but you're going to end up shooting yourself in the foot. There will be so much that you need to do, you will need to bring somebody on board to help you. And so that's just something to bear in mind. You need to know that you've got people in the office that will support you. The process is, as I said, it can be quite long, quite drawn out, depending on the scale of your business and how much you're selling it for and what type of advisors are on the other side. There are some ball-aching tasks within it. Okay, so you need to look at your processes, and if you think that you can deal with it on your own, you might well get there. You're probably going to add to the costs and delays along the way. Do your own research as to what you need as well. If you're looking at this transaction as a retirement project, then take some independent financial advice. Speak to your advisors, work out what your portfolio looks like, what it needs to look like to give you the lifestyle that you want after you've sold your business, and then appreciate what you need from the sale. Okay, it sets your bottom line. So often we see sellers going into this process with an idea of price, which may or may not be realistic, but not actually knowing what they need and why they need it and what it's going to generate for them over the long term. And why that's important is if you have done that research, then you know what your bottom line is, because the worst thing in the world is doing a bad deal, as Theresa May would say. So you have to know where you're going to go with it, okay? And that realistic valuation is important. You get that early. You speak to your accountant. If your accountant can't give you that advice, then he can put you in touch with somebody else that would. As I mentioned earlier, a corporate finance advisor would typically be able to give you a good valuation for your company and work out what you are most likely to get. So it's going to probably give you a range and then work out with you whether now is the right time to take your company to market. And it may not be the right time. I've got another client that we're engaged with at the moment, and we're helping them structure their company and get themselves in a fit state to sell. They took some advice probably about 9 months or so ago, thinking that they were going to go to market, but they just couldn't achieve the value that they needed. So they've had to go back, do a bit of work, grow the business, and then come back again. And we're now in the process with that one where we're putting all the nuts and bolts in place. We're making sure there are no skeletons in the cupboard that somebody else is going to pick up. So that when it does get to the process of selling, it can be as smooth as possible. They've won a few contracts, they've reshaped their business a little bit, taken out some of the fat that they didn't need, and is much more sellable. So they're in a much better place. So, as I said, it's a long-term project because it's going to shape, if it's a retirement project, the rest of your life, and therefore don't take it lightly. And it is hard work. You can't expect to sell your company and not have to lift a finger. It really is quite hard work for you. And stressful, incredibly stressful. So I think what you take from that is that realistic valuation to know what your business is worth and whether now is the right time or whether you need to do other things along the way. Take your personal finance advice so that you can work the two in tandem and you can negotiate with your eyes open, and get the right people around you. As I said, please be wary of people that are unsolicited, that come through the post or on the telephone telling you that they can get you the earth for your company. Because if it sounds too good for you, it probably is. Still not working. Right, these are completely switched off.
That's moved now.
Is it?
No. Do you want me to advance it?
Yes, please. Okay. Understand your likely market. I mean, there are a number of ways that one can shape a transaction, and you could sell your company. A lot will depend on your marketplace. If you're in a marketplace, which I think a lot of you will be, where there's some consolidation going on, then there are already buyers out there, and they might be looking to acquire your company for a number of reasons. It may well be that they're looking to take on some of the customer or supply arrangements that you've got. It may well be that they've got a factory with some resource in there that needs filling, and that can lead to all sorts of dynamics in terms of the sale process. I sold a company a few years ago where they'd been through an MBO, a management buyout, less than a year before, because they were worried that they would get their entrepreneurs relief. I think they bought that company for less than £2 million, and they were approached by somebody within the same trade within that year and asked if they consider selling. Now, it was a big organisation that was buying, and they sort of scratched their heads. They were two clever guys, actually, scratched their heads to work out why are they interested in us, and did a bit of research and worked out that they just invested millions in a new factory, new plant, and had a huge amount of capacity there. So the world was their oyster in terms of the deal that they could command. And they went off to a meeting, and they rushed together an information memorandum about their company. And on the way there, one looked at the other and said, and this is a true story, how much are we going to sell it for? Because we've not actually talked about this. Bearing in mind that they bought it for less than 2 million, less than a year before. And the other guy said, well, how big's that information memorandum you've put together? And he flipped through the pages. He said, well, it's 20 pages long. He said, well, there you go, then we'll ask for 20 million. And that's what they did, and that's what they got. So know your buyer, because it can influence an awful lot. If you're not in that fortunate situation, and there may not be a ready market out there, and it may be that you're not quite ready to let go entirely, then you could shape it through some form of management buyout. So if you've got a good management team in place, and we see a lot of this as well, and you see some companies changing hands over and over. So you'll have the founder, this chap that sets it up, that's run it, he's got his number two in place, he's taken as much cash out of it as he wants, sells the company to his number two, so we transact that through a management buyout, so that chap will set up a new company which will acquire it. That enables the original founder to take some money off the table, and over a number of years the company will pay for itself, and away he goes. The number two can do the same thing with the next tier of management, and you see that rolling on until you get a pretty duff management team or the market changes and then the thing screws up. But more often than not, they're successful, the company can pay for itself, and it can be shaped such that this seller can retain a part stake in the company going forward, and therefore benefit again from any upside that might bring. So you get that new blood coming in with a management team that's suddenly released to take this company forward in the way that they've always wanted to do. That can pay great dividends for the owner as well. So that's something to think about. So there's a trade buyers, management buyouts. You might get a private equity backed transaction. So it's a bit like a management buyout, but there's a bit more complexity to it in the sense that you're likely to have a management buy-in team backed by a private equity house, which is the guy with all the institution with the deep pockets. It certainly won't be as friendly a deal as the management buyout. Management buyouts, because you're dealing with people that you know and you're selling them and you're basically lending them money because you're not taking everything away on day one. Private equity is not quite like that. It's going to be a bit more fraught. There's more complexity to it. But again, it can be a great way of taking the thing forward and turning your company into something bigger, being part of something bigger, and taking a small slice of that bigger pie to go forward and benefit again. So again, there's an opportunity to take a bit more. So again, we often see, particularly where there's consolidation in the marketplace, or there's a bigger multiple paid by an acquirer for a bigger group of companies, then you see small companies that are successful in a particular niche area being snapped up by a bigger player. The seller can take some shares in the bigger player, and when that thing's eventually sold, take a bit more cash off the table. And then finally, employee ownership trust, which is fairly new. I mean, it's been around for a few years, but still not taken hold in the market. There's a degree of complexity to it. The benefits this can bring, and I'm by no means an expert in terms of employee ownership trust, but this is an ability to pass on your company to your employees effectively. And as an owner, you need to part with the controlling interest within it. There are huge tax advantages from doing it this way, but those tax advantages can be outweighed by the fact that you're not necessarily getting the best commercial deal for yourself as a seller. And if you fail to meet the strict criteria for the employee ownership trust, then the tax advantages can disappear as well. So just is one to mention, and as I said, is another option for you. Right. And then coming back to something I was talking about earlier, which is getting your house in order. This is absolutely key. And if you're selling because you're looking to retire, then there's no excuse for not doing this really. And what you're doing is you're looking at your company through the eyes of a potential buyer. And it's amazing how many times that we get clients, new clients, people that we've not worked, even actually clients that we have worked with that have said, no, we're absolutely fine. We don't need to take on board any of that. They come along and they say, ours is a very simple company. It's just me and my business partner. We've owned it for years. No issues, nothing by way of skeletons in the cupboard. And you get into it, and actually there are all sorts of things that have just not been done in the way that they could have been done. So I mean, we are dealing with predominantly private companies. If they're being acquired by a bigger organisation, and that bigger organisation is likely to have a city law firm, who are just going to have a checklist as long as your arm in terms of the boxes that those junior lawyers will want to tick. And what you need to remember is when the due diligence process, or when that research process goes on into the history of your company, those junior lawyers actually think that they're doing a jolly good job for their client if they can find lots of holes in your company. So that's what they're looking for. They're not necessarily taking a commercial view that frankly this makes no difference. Doesn't affect the profitability of the company, is not going to affect the longevity of the company. They feel that they're getting paid to pick holes in it, and that's what they do. But sometimes you come across, and all too often you come across serious problems, and it's simple things like a buyback of shares. Some of you may have been involved in those things. They're very simple things. The company, if there's an owner manager that's not being part of the business anymore, and it's decided that person can step back, then quite often that person's shares will be bought back off of him, and it's structured in such a way that he'll get his capital gains treatment for his shares, and away he goes for his retirement, leaving with what you think is 100% of the share capital. But so often we see those transactions done through accountants that don't tick the boxes. And the unfortunate thing with a buyback of shares is, whilst it's a very simple process, if you don't tick the boxes, the transaction's void. And so we have seen it, unfortunately, where you're having to deal with the estate of a deceased former shareholder because they actually still own the shares. And one transaction where the corporate finance guy had to pick the phone up to somebody that had left the business many years before to say, we're in the middle of a sale process, and actually the buyback you did back in 1998 wasn't done properly, so we're going to have to redo the paperwork. And the canny chap on the other end of the phone said, well, so unless I'm mistaken, what you're telling me is that you've won the lottery, but I'm holding the ticket. Because he realised that he hadn't sold his shares. So he'd got some money, and that was very nice, but he hadn't sold his shares. So you do your homework. Look at your company, as I said, through the eyes of a buyer. Engage some professionals. We've got a couple of transactions or not even transactions. We're helping clients at the moment with their own due diligence process, and so we don't need to be involved much. You don't need to spend much money. It's a case of just getting you going. And so that you can work through this stuff. Because as I said, when you get into the midst of a transaction, if you find a problem, such as a buyback of shares has not been done properly, or the IP that you rely on is not properly licensed to you, it can be a nightmare for you. It's going to be a difficult process as it is, and hugely stressful. And if we can take some of that away at the outset, then that's what we should be trying to do. So that's what we do with our clients. When people come along to us and say that we're looking to sell our company, when are you looking to do it? Let's get the processes in place. Let's start a vendor due diligence exercise now. We don't need to get involved in it. In fact, I don't enjoy doing it. It's quite boring. But it's a process that does need to be done. So let's get cracking with it. And that's I think, have a plan B. It's a crying shame and totally understandable that people get sucked into this process. And as I said, it does become all-consuming. And you just genuinely want it to end. And the worst thing in the world is when you see clients making sacrifices and conceding points, not legal points, commercial points, that they really ought not to be doing. Have a plan B, know what your bottom line is, and be prepared to walk away, because you just should not mentally buy that new car until you've sold your company, because the worst thing in the world is to wake up the day after you've done the transaction and realise you've actually done a bad thing. And that's it, I think, in terms of selling your company. Thank you.
Thank you.